I had to learn the hard way that burnout is not solved by vacation. You see, I remember in my worst state of burnout, I had a supervisor who approved about a week and a half of vacation, and I left. And she had also said, take as long as you need. And so while I was gone, I talked to her and she said, I told you to take as long as you need. So I extended for another 4 or 5 days. But what I learned was that didn't fix the problem because I came back to work. I was still exhausted. I didn't want to be at work and I could not see an end for what I was going through and what I was experiencing. And this often happens for high achievers because exhaustion that returns after rest isn't laziness, it's dysregulation, right? I was able to completely unplug mentally from work and I was physically in a different state, but I was still so exhausted because my entire nervous system was so dysregulated that rest did not help fix the problem. Yes, rest does help. Rest is supposed to help restore your energy, but it doesn't help the nervous system function. We have to release the energy that's in our nervous system in some way. And so if rest doesn't fix it, burnout won't go away, right? Because if rest worked, burnout wouldn't exist. But again, it's part of the system. I talk about systems because it's not just one thing that fixes burnout or long-term stress. And just like in the previous video, it's not one thing that fixes trauma. But recovery does require more than just stepping away from work. So let's talk about why does rest work for fatigue but not burnout? Because fatigue is often just a temporary depletion. So a period of rest you can recover from. Where burnout is actually chronic injury to your nervous system. So burnout, right, is that long-term stress of one event after another that just does not stop, where your nervous system is constantly assessing those threats. That is why rest alone does not work for burnout, but fatigue it does because fatigue can come from a lot of different things. When you're fatigued, and most likely we get fatigued from working too much or exercising too much, or maybe we just had one stressful day, but the day before was just fine. So when you're fatigued, you can recover with sleep and downtime, but burnout truly requires a full recalibration of your system. And I've walked hundreds of people through that, and I've had clients go, Deidre, are you sure that's going to work? Yep, I promise you. Let's do 3 things, very simple, 2 weeks, and then tell me what's going on. Because the entire system needs recalibrated, right? We're talking about your mind, your emotions, your physical body. It all needs recalibrated. And remember that different problems require different solutions. And each person needs slightly different solutions. We're not cookie cutter people, and our problems are not cookie cutter. So we do need different solutions. But let's talk about what does chronic stress, what happens to that and to your sleep and how those are so intertwined, right? And this happens because when you have that constant surge of cortisol because you're stressed, it disrupts your circadian rhythm. Your body again is like, I have this energy, I have this, what am I supposed to do with it? And so sleep is harder, right? Maybe you're saying, I just can't get my body to calm down. Yeah, probably. It's got a lot of cortisol that needs to do something with. Chronic stress or that long-term stress also causes that hyperarousal in your brain, which does block deep sleep, right? So if we're hyper-aroused, if we're hyper-vigilant, we're always on alert. Our brains are scanning for threats and determining if we're safe. And if we're in a deep sleep, we're not aware of what's going on. And so those can't coexist. And so if you're constantly trying to assess things, your sleep's going to get worse. Oftentimes people will start sleeping lighter. So that light sleep replaces that restorative sleep. The restorative sleep is when we're getting that deeper sleep. And this does happen a lot, right? For parents, mothers in particular, when you have newborns and you have toddlers, you do sleep in more of a light state because you're on alert, paying attention. Do they need something? Are they awake? And at some point, that can be too much stress, but you learn to function in that. But we have to be careful that when we've been in that long-term stress for too long, we don't stay out of that restorative sleep, that we're not in that light sleep for too long. We have to get that restorative sleep to recover. We oftentimes will normalize, "Oh, I just wake up throughout the night," which is common when you're stressed, right? Do you ever wake up and go, "I totally forgot to do X, Y, and Z," or, "Uh-oh, what's going to come up at work tomorrow?" I hear that a lot. Okay, well, that's because your body's not able to get into that restorative sleep. Your mind is still alert. It's still anxious and stressed about something. And so we want to work to shift that, right? And we want to make sure that when we're in this long-term state of stress, that rest is no longer restoring energy if you're chronically stressed. It requires more than just rest to get that energy back. And again, that's because in the first video, we talked about how burnout and long-term stress affects the biology, the physiology of how your brain or your body is functioning. So it takes more than just rest to recover that energy. We have to repair it and rebuild it. But why does rest without regulation fail, right? So rest is a part of the puzzle. But if your nervous system is still remaining in that threat mode where it's constantly assessing for threat and constantly keeping you in survival mode, rest is not helping your nervous system shift back out of that because your brain is not downshifting back out. And so if your nervous system and your brain aren't shifting back out of that survival mode, rest is not going to help that regulation. We have to do other things for your nervous system and for your brain. And so if your brain's not downshifting and your nervous system is still sensing threat, your body's not going to repair, right? Because it's still taking all of your energy reserves and putting it to that assessment, putting it into that sense of, am I safe? Am I not? What do I have to do to survive? And so really it becomes about exhaustion is persistent. It's not stopping. And so I know I've said it in the previous video, but people tend to blame themselves because they're not recovering, because they're not accomplishing what they used to. And instead, they need to look at the physiology of what's going on in their body because they are so interconnected, right? And yes, there are things we can do individually to work through that, but you can't blame yourself for your body and your brain doing what it was designed to do, which is keep you safe. So what does actually restore a burned out system, right? This is a multi-step process that I talk about all the time. So first and foremost, we have to get that nervous system regulation, which is helping your nervous system get back down to that calm state. It has to learn, okay, this environment is not a threat. Whatever we are doing is not a threat. We can calm down and it's okay to not be on alert. So we have to work on that nervous system regulation. We have to repair your circadian rhythm. We have to restore that quality and optimization of your sleep. And I always focus on quality, but that comes in twofold, right? Focusing on improving quality, but also restoring your circadian rhythm so that you can optimize sleep, so that your body and your brain can repair and recover. We also have to make sure that that stress cycle is getting completed. that it's not just this half circle and then we start it again, half circle and start again. We have to complete the full cycle. We also have to work on that physiological safety restoration so your entire system knows that you're safe. And we have to work on the biological changes. We have to work on repairing what it destroyed in your body. We have to repair in the nutrition, right? Repair your digestion, repair whatever broke down. These are all aspects of truly repairing and recovering from burnout. But why is sleep maybe the foundational piece I've talked about a lot? It is a gateway to burnout recovery. And this is because when you sleep, your mind and your body will re-regulate those stress hormones. Your body goes into repair mode, and so does your brain, right? So a lot of people will say, I've had some really weird dreams. Okay, let's talk about what was going on in those dreams if you remember them. But most likely, for people who have been burnt out and even into the trauma, those dreams is your brain trying to process and understand those experiences so your brain can let them go. Your brain can move them into that long-term storage, right? And so that's where it helps on the cognitive function, because when you can understand what you've experienced, or at least make sense of it, let's maybe put it that way. Understanding might not always happen, but when our brains can make sense of it, it can let it go. It can put it in the long-term memory. And so our cognitive function will come back. Your prefrontal cortex will come back online when you can re-regulate. So your stress hormones, yes, are going to regulate so that your body starts to function normally, or it's starting to get there. During sleep, your emotional health, your emotional regulation also repairs. That's part of your brain repairing and recovering from the previous day's events. But during sleep, your physical body also recovers, right? So if you think about, have you ever had a surgery or a family member who's had a surgery? What do doctors prescribe? X number of days of just rest. And most likely what happens is people are going to sleep periodically throughout the day and throughout the night for several days because their body is trying to recover from what it just went through with surgery. It's the same thing with stress. Sleep helps the body repair, and it's also going to help rebuild your physical energy, right? So as it's repairing, it's helping, not fully doing it, but it's helping replenish your energy reserves, restoring where your body puts its energy so it can function normally. And so remember that, yes, sleep is foundational because no recovery will work if we're not sleeping. Sleep is imperative. And so if this is making sense and you're questioning, okay, well, now what do I do to start to get this relief? I encourage you to check out the 5-day Breakthrough Burnout Challenge, where you can get those practical tools that are science-backed and burnout specific, because it teaches you that getting relief now so that you can repair during sleep, right? It gives practical tips that in 2 weeks, you'll start to experience a difference when you add it to or use it to help you sleep better. And so the link is in the description. But remember that rest doesn't fail. It's just incomplete. It's part of the whole picture. Burnout recovery does require that biological repair, which starts with easy to implement solutions, because no system heals without shutting down safely. And when we get that restorative sleep, we shut down safely.